Let's talk about serialization for modding Minecraft. Before we go forward, we need to understand everything about codecs and how we can handle codecs, what are the codecs, and why did Mojang move toward using codecs. Hello everyone, this is Ali Reza. Welcome to the Mentor Code Lab. If we want to understand codecs, we need to understand what is serialization in general. If we want to have a brief explanation and introduction into serialization, we should say that serialization is conversion of a state of an object into a byte stream. In contrast with serialization, we have the term deserialization, that is the opposite operation of serialization. Now, these two definitions may be confusing. To put it simple, when we say we are serializing something, it means that we are converting that Java object into a static stream of bytes. And now this stream of bytes can be written on the hard drive in different formats: binary files, JSON text files, ini files, or even a simple text file if you want to. When we are talking about deserialization, it means that we are reading that file from hard drive, converting its content into a static stream of bytes, and then converting this static stream of bytes into Java objects. The process of serialization is instance independent. It means that if I have an application and I can run this application in parallel to itself, so I have two instances of the same application on the same PC or on two different PCs, it doesn't matter. In one application, I can serialize something, and on the other application, I can deserialize the same thing. Instances of the application can do both of the operations at the same time. Also, remember that everything that needs to be serialized by default needs to implement an interface called serializable. Implementing serializable have a little bit of explanation to do, and that is that if I mark a class serializable, every subclass that is extending this class is serializable by default. Also, it means that if I want to have a list of objects and this list of objects needs to be serialized, every object in that list needs to be serializable. Also, it means that if I'm adding any object as an attribute inside the serializable class, that object itself needs to be serializable if we want to serialize it. Let's give you a theoretic example of how the final result will look like. Let's say that we have this class, okay? It's just a bunch of attributes, I don't know, a boolean, a block state, and a list of integers. We want to serialize it on hard drive using JSON. Using JSON, we will get something like this. If we compare these to each other, you see that this boolean foo will become something like this: the key foo and the value. So JSON is all about key value pairs. Block state, well, let's talk about it later, but the list of integer becomes the key, as the same name here, and then the values that we have inside the list. Now, this block state is a more complex thing. It's a JSON element by itself. This element has few entries for itself, and as you see, it's again a key and a pair value. Here the key is block state underline example, the value is a complex element, and in the value again we have keys and values continuously inside nested hierarchy. This is the process. So when we are serializing this class into JSON, it means that we are converting the values inside this class into the JSON file. And when we say we are deserializing it, it means that we are reading the JSON and we are creating an instance of the class in memory with the values that we have in JSON. Okay, let's talk about codecs. Actually, Mojang has his own flexible system of serialization handling for JSON, and it sits in a library called Data Fixer Upper, or DFU. Remember, we have a JSON and we want to be able to convert something inside Minecraft or Fabric API into the JSON. Now, instead of going into the Java and utilizing serializers for JSON from Java, Mojang started defining his own wrapper around this whole thing, and it's called codec. Now, a codec may look confusing at the start, but in this video we will talk a little bit about the anatomy and skeleton of a codec, and then we will move and proceed forward in the code examples in the next video, and we will understand codecs in depth. Just remember that codecs represents specification of an object. So So by adding codecs to something, we are telling the system that, hey, this is how you can serialize and deserialize this object. The codec is not responsible of serialization and deserialization. It's just a map that defines how the serialization should work. Also, we can use our own way of making codecs, or we can use already defined codecs. So we have flexibility there. Because Mojang has developed some codecs for himself, we can utilize that. And if there is something that Mojang didn't handle, we can handle it ourselves. This first example, let's dive into it. The very first thing that we see is this codec and the type foobar. This is a generic definition. We name it codec and we use the codec builder.create. We always use this. So our entry point is always the codec builder.create. After that, we always use this lambda, instance.group. Instance means the instance of the class. So here we are defining that, hey, for the class foobar, any instance of foobar in memory, we have a group of attributes that we want to map for serialization. After the whole thing, you see that it applies the instance, and it applies the instance into something. The something is a lambda with 3 variables here because this is the section that we will use for deserialization. And you see it returns a new foobar class using these 3 variables inside lambda. So the deserialization section is self-explanatory. We have 3 variables. We call the constructor with those 3 variables. And we use this instance mapping to do that. However, the main thing on this picture is these 3 lines. And in 2 slides, I will try to explain what is going on here as the base skeletal structure, because if you don't understand this, we can't go any farther into the code later. So the first line, it says codec.bool.field of something for getter something. Now, if we want to dissect this, the codec is the class, our entry inside different codecs. Here we are defining our own primitive type. Basically, we are just saying that, hey, the primitive type that we want to use is a Boolean. And this codec.bool is just a definition for mapping a primitive type of Boolean. Because if we take a look at different variables in Java, at the end of the line, we are coming face to face with some primitive definitions. Even the most complex classes can be dissected down to a bunch of variables and attributes that are using primitive types. So if we can handle primitive types, one way or another, we are able to handle everything. So we are using a Boolean here. The next part, the field of. The field of sets the key for the JSON. Don't make the mistake. It's not the name of the attribute inside the class. No, it's the key string that will be used inside JSON. Now, it looks like for getter should work for the reverse, isn't it? It says that, hey, we have an object foobar and we want to assign o.foo. Oh, no, we are not defining the way for deserialization. It's wrong. We are defining the attributes that we should look for to get the value for the serialization. Remember, everything that happens inside instance.group is related to serialization, not deserialization. So here, all these 3 lines inside instance.group is telling the system how to get the value and how to convert it to JSON and how to write it in JSON, not the other way. For getter is responsible of addressing the attribute that we should look for to extract the value. Basically, here we are saying that, hey, I have a Boolean that I want to write into the JSON, use the foo key for the JSON, and this is the variable inside the class that you should look to get the value of that Boolean and then convert it and write it into the JSON. Same happens inside codec.int. Here we are using integer primitive type. We have something extra here, list of. It means that, hey, this is a list of integers, okay? So don't worry. It's just primitive type, but a list of primitive type. Then we say that, hey, use this bar as key inside JSON, and then this list sits inside the bar attribute inside the foobar class. So go into the foobar class, look into the bar attribute, get the list of integers, serialize them, and write them in JSON using the bar keyword. Now remember, when the system knows how to serialize something, it automatically knows how to deserialize it. If you take a look inside this instance.group, we are telling the system how to serialize something. But when we go to apply the lambda for deserialization and returning this foobar class, we are not doing something special. We are just calling the constructor with the lambda. Or alternatively, I think you can produce a supplier here We will take a look at that in code. So we are not doing anything for deserialization. The system automatically knows how to deserialize because it knows what steps it took to serialize this. So the deserialization is just the reverse of the process. Now, let's take a look at this last line. Block state.codec field of for getter. Now, here we are using a predefined codec for ourselves. Basically, the blockstate.codec is a predefined codec provided by Minecraft itself. Mojang had this codec that is mapping block states. So we are just using that. Instead of defining it ourselves, we are saying that, okay, you had done it, we just use it. So here we are using that predefined codec. We are providing the key and we are providing the attribute to look for. So the field of and for getter is the same as before. There is nothing special here. We are just defining the key, the attribute. However, instead of defining this codec ourselves, thankfully, Mojang had done the job. So we are using that codec ourselves. That is all the theory behind codecs, because from this point forward, we need to get busy coding and understand codecs better inside the code, and that happens in the next video.
If you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on that bell so that when I publish a new video, you will get informed. Have fun, everyone. Bye.